everybody, and welcome back to the first game of today, TENSTAR against Who.Cars. This is actually Who.Cars' final game, whereas TENSTAR still has one more to go later this week. And this game, in terms of expectations, I think we've seen it from the talent prediction as well. Every person thinks that TENSTAR has a pretty good shot at winning this game. But I want to point out Who.Cars and how strong they have been, and their performance last week, just how solid and how good it looked. So that is something that you personally cannot take away from them. And one of those teams, one of the two teams actually, that is here in Polaris that doesn't have an org. So as we mentioned, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to be able to dedicate a lot of their research and VOD reviews and strategies, etc., etc. Everything you need to be able to work together as a team and to be able to pull it off. Now, we kind of talked about the expectations of the talent, and we kind of gave our initial reasonings as to why this is something we went with. But Moxie, what is something that you could pick out from TENSTAR that's just really, you think is really, really going to just shake it up and make it so much more difficult for Who.Cars to get a win?
So I think it is going to have a big impact on the resources, right? Because last week we did see TENSTAR have a little bit of a stumble at the beginning, but then we saw the call light coming through, the timeout coming, and they sort of reset the mentality. The coach came in, they had to talk through the strategies, they planned out what they wanted to change, and that's when we saw the big shift. That's when we saw the true TENSTAR really start to move and power forward. And that is something that, as you pointed out, Who.Cars aren't really going to have, because lacking the coach, lacking the resources, everything that you do when those timeouts come through, it's still just going to be those same 5 players trying to figure out what's going wrong, what you do need to change, as opposed to TENSTAR, who can have those expert opinions coming through and giving them just a little bit more confidence in being able to turn the mentality around.
Yeah, that win that was coming through against Tundra last week, it solidified their position within the top 4. It allowed them the chance to prove themselves at what they're capable of, but it might not be enough. It hasn't erased all doubts that a lot of the individuals like talent have against these teams, but their communication, their strategy, it's looking like they have it on check. It's looking much more solid than we saw initially going into the competition. And last week, I want to mention it again, Polvi and Cray, they did really well. Like, Polvi's really stepped up on that jet, Cray on Viper, on Icebox. I don't really know what to say about that performance, except that it's something that I personally do not want to be playing against.
Yeah, I feel like you do just have to ban Icebox out, purely because Cray would be playing Viper on it, and I wouldn't want to go anywhere near a map where he was playing Viper quite so well. But again, it comes down to, do Who.Cars feel confident enough? It's one of their strongest maps. In fact, it's one of their only 2 where they do have above that 70% win rate. Do you really want to issue that statement and go to somewhere where you're at least got a little bit of an even footing, as opposed to some of the other maps where we do see a little bit of a reason why they would potentially want to avoid things like Fracture? You don't want to run into a Neon. Things like Ascent, you don't really want to run into Polvi's Jet, which is something that you do have to be extremely careful of as well.
Yeah, next to Messlin Chamber as well, not really something you want to be running in on Icebox either. And we saw it from the side of Who.Cars when they were playing last week, and they were struggling a little bit to adapt very quickly as you kind of need them to adapt. It took them a couple of rounds and even a timeout to be able to really take back control of the game and be able to play as the Who.Cars that we have seen in the qualifiers, and also as the Who.Cars that we expected to see going into this game these weeks. And we mentioned they don't have an and they aren't really able to do this full time, but I think that they are just doing so incredibly well with the really limited amount of time and resources that they have available to them. They were able last week to just pull those timeouts. They were able to take Korva to the 3rd map, something that I don't think anyone really expected. There was even overtime coming through, and I think every single player on the roster of Who.Cars have really been able to prove themselves individually as good players, good mechanically. They know what they're doing, they know how to play their agent, but it's just a matter of just gluing it together as a team.
Yeah, and I feel like together they are really strong, right? The agent pool is what you would really want to see coming out from Valorant. Mishu's Sova is absolutely stunning, so if you do want to try and counter Cray's Viper, you'll always have the Recon Bolts, the Hunter's Fury to cut through the pit. What I want to draw the attention to, though, is David. Because this guy, when he pops off, he pops off. He's had some matches where he's been above 70 in terms of kills that he's been able to pick up. And so David versus Polvi is a matchup that I'm really looking forward to see, especially if, Master's going to be coming in on that Astra again. And we should note we are playing on 4.03. It is Time Machine Valorant. We've hopped back into the past. Yoru is still not going to be picked. We're not going to be seeing the clone Flash Yorus coming through anytime soon, at least not until playoffs. But no, look at these two. This matchup between these two players is going to be something that has a lot of weight, a lot of impact in how Hookahs are able to move forward. Because if you're going to be able to take Polvi out of the match, well, it's going to make things a lot easier for the rest of the team to try and contest things like Crazed Viper, now that you don't have to worry about constantly trying to contest the verticality whenever the toxic screen drops to trying to find Polvi's head.
Yeah, and the question here is going to be, is Polvi going to find your head first, or are you going to be able to find his head? And I think that's something that Jero is going to have to keep your eye out as well. Specifically, these two players on the Jet, they have been phenomenal. They have had such a big impact on the success of both of their teams, and they are really able to step it up. But I also think that when looking at TENSTAR specifically, they still have a lot of different players, and they have that versatility in terms of agent pool as well coming through from their players. So you can expect to see Doma on, we saw him on the Raze, we saw him on the Sky, we saw him on the Sova as well. And then you have other players on the team that are able to do just the same. And I think that is something that Hookahs will also have to keep in the back of their mind, because you don't really know exactly what strategy they're going to be pulling out. So going into the map predictions here, and I think this is something that we kind of touched upon earlier in the pre-show as well, but I still want to go back to it, and that is, how exactly does TENSTAR want to play this? Do they want to pick a map and maybe give out a couple of strategies? Because, of course, they're going to have these games on tape, they're going to be on VOD, and if they are in the top 4 spots, the other teams are going to be looking for those VOD reviews just so they can, figure out and those strategies. Or do they just want to play it casual against Hookahs that is currently at the bottom of the leaderboard? Maybe they don't feel too threatened, and they're just going to pull out whatever they're comfortable with. And I know that Derma mentioned last week that you can't ban them out. They are currently feeling comfortable in every single map, and they've showed it to us in their performance on Bind, on Fracture, on Icebox, which specifically Icebox, we really expected them to not be able to win that map, but they still did. So I think for the whole map prediction thing, I would probably expect Icebox to be banned out, but not in terms because TENSTAR doesn't feel comfortable playing on it, but rather they want to take that comfort pick away from Hookahs, and they want to force them onto something that they're not fully comfortable and not fully adapted to just yet.
Yeah, I think we might perhaps be seeing Icebox taking a little bit of an exit, because not only that, if you take Icebox away from Hookahs in terms of their comfort maps, the only comfort map that they have left is Bind. And you're really happy if Bind pops up, because you've got a composition that thrives on Bind, that does extremely well on Bind and is extremely oppressive in all of those spaces where you are pretty much just forced to immediately give up massive slices of the map to actually be able to move around it safely. If you try and clump up, the Raze gets so much more value. The more players that run into the Raze, the more bodies are going to get hit by the paint shells and the satchel packs and the showstopper as well. She's really good at forcing these split-offs. And I mean, if you move away from Icebox, you also move away from the composition that Hookahs like to run on it. They like the Jet, they like the Reyna, they like to run the double duelist, but they also like to run the Sage. And yeah, Sage is one of those that sometimes we get to see coming in on Icebox, right? Still has a lot of impact in terms of being able to use the wall to get the spike to go down. But at the same time, if you're trying to run something like a chamber, you don't really want the Sage to be there, because yes, you've got the rendezvous to try and get away if you do find yourself cut off from the team with the wall and the slow orb. But sometimes it's just not enough to be able to go for those really aggressive angles that XMS was looking for every single time on that B site when we saw TENSTAR playing the map last.
Yeah, and speaking of the maps that we're going to be looking at, map video has finished, so we're going to be having a look, and I've actually been proven wrong. Icebox has been left open, and it has been selected by TENSTAR. So they have decided to give Hookahs a comfort pick, but then Hookahs going for that Bind, and it's something that you were talking about just now, how good Doma's Raze has been on Bind, and how good it has been at creating pressure, creating space, just flying out of every single different angle, getting all eyes on him, and then the rest of the team just being able to take that side freely without any contesting going through. And then of course Fracture, hopefully with the neon. I think that is something that you definitely love to see here today. But any surprises in terms of the maps that we're seeing in front of us right now?
The fact that Fracture wasn't insta-banned, honestly, by Hookahs, they chose Haven. Because they don't have a good track record of Fracture. They haven't played it a lot, but I don't think they've actually won a single time on Fracture as opposed to TENSTAR, who's had a really strong showing on Fracture in the past. Icebox is going to be the big decider, because I think if we do see TENSTAR take Icebox and then Hookahs are able to take Bind, Fracture is very strongly sided in TENSTAR's favor.
Yeah, and the fact that Icebox hasn't been banned out by Hookahs, it kind of leaves the question as to whether or not they have done their homework, because we mentioned that just XMS and Cray just looking so strong on Icebox with the Chamber and the Viper. So the question here remains, has Hookah looked at the VOD? Have they done a little bit of research? Have they come up with a couple of strategies to be able to counter that? Because if Tundra wasn't able to do it, then Hookahs, it begs the question as to why exactly they left it open. I think it could be, trap card up their sleeve. We've seen a couple of those in Polaris coming through, where teams are just very comfortable with certain maps and they're more than happy to let the opposing team pick it and play it on them and even take the map away from them. But this first map, I think, is going to be really, really crucial. I think in terms of also just a mental from Hookahs going on to the Icebox, they know that it's one of their strongest maps, and if they take the win, that's incredible. That's just going to give them so much momentum and so much more confidence going into the next map, which is Bind. But if that is the opposite, then it's going to be like, oh, we kind of like lost on our best performing map. Are we going to be able to do even better on Bind? And I think that with Valorant just being such a big momentum game, it's just like, it's looking a bit difficult for Hookahs. And I'm hoping to see this as close a competition as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you don't have that morale going into Bind, you can find yourself stuffed up with hesitation. And hesitation is where things like that raise really do find a lot of power, because you can just cycle through that utility, force the clock to slowly drain away, and then you get that burst of panic where you're like, oh wait, we've only got 20 seconds, we can't go for a fake, we have to go onto the side. And that's when things just start to fall apart. Raze is very good at being able to just play the clock so well, no matter which side she's on, whether it's the attack, whether it's the defense. And that happens on Icebox as well. Sometimes we see the Raze come through, sometimes it's the Killjoy, sometimes it's even the Viper and the Sova who just wait on belt when the spike is down, using those lineups, making sure that when you do try and go for something like the defuse, then you just cycle through the utility. Don't let them have the time to be able to actually stick the defuse. And so you say the series is going to be won in the first map. I think it's going to be won in the first rounds. Because for me, for Hookahs, not only are they a very momentum-heavy team as is TENSTAR, but if things start going wrong, we do see that mentality start to slip away, and they do start to doubt themselves, and hesitation really does come through. And if XMS does go for the chamber and does go super aggressive and look for those angles, he's going to be really happy if you're hesitating, because that means that there's more time for him to set up for a very early aggressive kill, and then immediately he can use that card, the Rendezvous, to get safely out of the way without being punished. Very similar to how we see Jets go for very aggressive early peaks with things like the operators or the knives, and then squirrel back to the safety of their team with the dash.
Yeah, and I think XMS on the chamber is definitely one of those things that Hookahs has to keep an eye out for. But I also want to mention Cray and just how well he played that lurking Viper on Icebox as well. And I think when it comes to Hookahs, it's something that we saw last week as well, and we saw it in quite a few of their games, where they kind of just shuffle all of them towards one side of the map. They don't cover their flank, they're not pressing that W key to go forward, and they're just gonna get trapped and pinchered in that small pockets that they're holding. And at that point, it's you either have to push forward or someone's gonna be coming from the back, and a lot of the times it doesn't really work out in their favor. And that is one of those things, that undecisiveness and just the hesitation that's going to come through. Like, it's, if you're going to be going onto a site, then XMS is holding it with a chamber, and he has that through the force in operation. He's ready to just teleport out with that rendezvous and says goodbye. Then you kind of have to weigh up your options. Do you want to be running it onto that site? Do you want to play it really slow and leave your flank vulnerable to potentially Cray that's going to be coming through with that Viper? And that's just going to make it that much more difficult. Also, one thing that Hookahs has been doing quite often that we've seen last week is they let the clock run down. So they have, and it could be a strategy, it just could be their indecisiveness, but they're on those 30 seconds before they get that plan down. And as you mentioned, Moxie, there's a lot of lineup potential on Icebox, and if you're gonna let that clock run down, you're just putting yourself in such a difficult situation as to, are you gonna be able to get the plan down, especially if you maybe don't run the Sage, because Hookahs do like to run the Omen on Icebox, and just a reminder, everybody, this is 4.3. This is not the new patch. Omen has not been buffed just yet. That is probably not going to be Yoru either. But I think that's, again, one of those things that you really have to think about as Hookars going into Icebox. How are you going to adapt your playstyle accordingly to make sure that TENSTAR doesn't capitalize off of it and doesn't abuse it as much as they possibly can?
Yeah, because this was actually something we were debating, right? We were talking about, okay, even with the changes coming through to Astra, do we feel like Omen is going to be able to slip back into the meta? And I think we both came to the conclusion that no.
Yes,
unfortunately, just because you compare everything that Omen and Astra do, and yes, some of them are extremely similar when it comes to, you know, denial, map control, and also buying time for rotations to safely come through with things like the Paranoia and the Dark Covers, and Astra just using the stars, the Gravity Well, the Nebulas, and of course the pulses to try and make sure that you buy the time for your team to rotate. The difference is that Omen can't anchor sites as naturally as something like a Chamber or an Astra, because an Astra gets to just stand on his side, and even if, say, something is happening off on the other side of the map entirely, she just gets to go into that meditative form of astral form, immediately plonks all of the stars, and still has such a huge impact. But surprise, surprise, no Omen, no Astra. TENSTAR going to be running Chamber once more. XMS picking this one up as Hookars. This is the composition. This is their bread and butter in terms of Icebox. They've got the double duelist, they've got the Jet, they've got the Reyna. That is punishment if either XMS or Polvi decide to go a little bit too aggressive, because both of those agents don't have anything to try and open up the fight, as opposed to the layer to come through for Mask to be able to get that flash to connect and set up a kill. Polvi and XMS are going to be relying on the smoke and the trademark to be able to set themselves up with the slow and the smoke to try and cover your exit or let you get a little bit closer. But it's not something that's going to immediately render a member of Hookars entirely vulnerable to being shot first.
Yeah, we're seeing the Reyna instead of the Chamber from the side of Hookars. They're not running the Omen this time around, which I personally am pretty happy to see. They seem to have been adapting just a little bit better than what we saw initially. The question here is Reyna going to be able to even bring half as much as what Chamber can be bringing to TENSTAR's team?
Well, TENSTAR are going to be on the defense first of all. As XMS not going to be on the B side, it is going to be the Viper Cray anchored in that position, as we do see defensive Vipers do. But Polvi is actually going to be able to get David first of all. This is the hesitation that we talked about from Hookars now coming through. They've lost a Jet. They don't really want to try and pressure this A side. Belt, they cannot peek. It is firmly in the hands of Polvi, and now they are forced to try and rotate around the site. They want that mid control, but you can see that TENSTAR are just waiting for them to try and walk through, as Yellow doesn't actually know whether someone is going to be moving through the smoke. And this is the hesitation. This is the pacifism that we have seen from this team.
Yep, Cray's still holding B side, something we've seen him do time and time again, and he has been quite good at it. Hookars, they lose a member, they look a little disoriented in terms of what side they want to go to and how they want to play this. And you mentioned this, and we mentioned this as well time and time again last week. It's continuous play style that we're seeing coming through from Hookars. They're gonna be able to get that Sage Wall barrier up, they're gonna get the plant down, and they haven't picked up any members when going onto that B side, so they still have the numbers disadvantage, and they still have to play off 5 members from TENSTAR. Sure, they're in post-plant position, and the time is ticking for TENSTAR. Is here, they kind of have to pick up that pace a little bit, but it's a question of whether it's gonna be possible or not. Mixture gets the 3K with that Sheriff, making it so much work. Doma gonna be able to pick him off. Mass on the trade coming through. Akimbo with another, and it is the first pistol round in the bag by Hookars. Just as quickly as it started is how quickly it was over.
Oh my goodness. Talk about round 1 by utility. That lid was perfect. The lid, the Sheriff shot, the collateral. Oh my goodness, I want to see that in slow-mo. Thank you, observers. I'm sure we're going to get to see it in just a couple seconds. Like, yeah, that shot was gorgeous, but look at this. Lid sets up and they just line themselves one behind the other. And Hookars, it was looking pretty dire for them. They were waiting, they were playing that pacifism. They weren't necessarily sure, and you could see that TENSTAR were knowing baiting them towards that B site, looking for that retake, but there's the updraft. David actually going to be trying again the same angle of taking up that high ground, and it is actually forcing TENSTAR not to be able to try and contest it right now, is allowing Hookahs a little bit of movement forward. They're able to take Polvi out of the way. They're immediately going to be setting them up to move on to that A side, as Mash is now overhealed and can try and get Doma out of the way. It's over, gone. They're coming in on a much stronger buy, as Mishu is making sure that no one can flank them, no one can catch them out. Despite that, Xmas is going to be able to get the shotty out of the way, but not able to finish off the jet. And Hookahs, it's a round that we expected to see, but my goodness, such early aggression coming from this team. It's a strong showing. They're not really that hesitant team, that passive play that we were worried they would fall into in these early rounds.
Yeah, Hookahs adapting accordingly, making sure that they are just staying away from that hesitation this round specifically. Again, you mentioned this is a round we expected them to win. They had the guns advantage in terms of the Spectres coming on, and Mash just really pressing that W key, going in. And I think one of those beauties of Reina is if you do manage to get a pick, you can heal yourself up and you can go back in right away and make sure that you can get a couple of more numbers added to your tally. And that's exactly what Mask did, create that space, allow the team to push through. And although TENSTAR was trying to go for those flanks, something we've seen them do time and time again, it looked like Hookahs was ready. When that flank came through, they got that pick off. Even it was just a shorty. Barrier was gonna come up, and Masked with that Spectre gets one pick. Jarla gets another. Brody and Craig coming through with the trade. It's one apiece for every single member so far, and it's dead equal in terms of numbers that are left. But it's not that equal in terms anymore. Craig picks up Jarla once again, adding a 2k. 18 HP on a Kimber. Has to try and make this work. He's the last player standing, doesn't have the spike, manages to pick it up. The cage is doing that much more damage. He's not gonna get that Vandal from the ground. They don't want to give him any peeks, and he's pinchered. Polvi coming in from behind. He has two members at the front that he has to deal with. Snakebite gonna come through. He gets Cray, but if Polvi trades him out, and that is round number 3 in the bag for TENSTAR, making this a 2-1 for Hookahs, but it looks like TENSTAR is slowly finding their footing and coming back.
Oh, I love the positioning coming from TENSTAR as well. They put Brody on that A site with the Sage, so they knew that Hookahs would go aggressive onto the A. They used that Sage wall to slow everything down, and they're actually, because the utility is just burnt out from the side of Hookahs a little bit before they're able to get onto that site, they are able to just hold those angles, those corners, and wait for Hookahs to reveal themselves and walk straight into Cray, who is just waiting on that corner. But that was a round that TENSTAR needed to take, right? They'd saved, they ecoed on the second round, they waited for the rifles. They did lose a couple of their members, so Cray is actually still on an SMG alongside Brody, the rest of the team on those rifles. Ooh, beautiful pick from Doma. That's why you really want to contest Kitchen if you're going to be moving towards that B site. Hookahs very quickly falling apart.
Picks coming through left, right, and center. Doma contesting Kitchen, making it sure that no one is going to be crossing through there, but also the early pick and the early aggression coming through from Polvi. He gets a pick and he backs right off. He doesn't want to overextend, wants to make sure it's just calculated and he doesn't get traded out right away. This already kind of distorts Hookahs a little bit. They're unaware as to where they want to go next, and this is the hesitation that we've seen coming through. And as they have two members pushing up through Kitchen, they weren't able to get that trade through on Doma. They had the Poisonous Cloud that was just making it that much more difficult for them to actually see. The line of sight were completely cut off. Doma was capitalizing off of that, got those two early picks, and this is one of the things with Hookahs. When the numbers go down, it looks like it just hits them a little bit too hard, and they're not sure where they want to continue. Whereas TENSTAR, they keep it cool, get a couple of picks off, and they actually finish the round taking out every single member of Hookahs, and now they're going to be forced on an eco.
Yeah, Hookahs bundling up on that weaker buy. Having to go in with full numbers, but TENSTAR just trying to bait them in. Keeping such good control of these angles, and Hookahs don't know. They haven't had any sort of information over mid, so they think that TENSTAR are going to be wrapping around and trying to get that stab in the back. This is really dangerous, because potentially they could all try and move towards that B site, and they have to have seen that Polvi isn't playing with this team. You cannot push that B site. The second you come out from Garage, the operator is going to be there. Your Viper wall is already set up on the A side. You are not going to be able to deny its line of sight, which is why they are now wrapping back around towards the A, in the hopes that TENSTAR have actually fallen with that cut noise for the fact that they could be putting the spike into a separate part of the map.
Yeah, and although they dragged Doma towards Kitchen, the rest of the members from TENSTAR stayed onto A side, holding it with their lives. They got 2 picks already, and Doma getting another one. Brody with 2k. They now have last player standing is Mishu. That Sheriff gets 1 pick, doesn't have another one in the bank, and Cray takes him out. The Fuse is going to be coming through. TENSTAR securing another round, and they had the util down on the A side, the Viper's Wall, they had the Poisonous Cloud, the Snake Bite even, making it so difficult for Hookars to get onto that side. They cut off their lines of sight as well. They weren't able to gather any information as to who is going to be on the A side and whether or not there's going to be another player on B or on mid. And that precondition of how TENSTAR likes to play these games, they like to wrap around, they like to get that mid control, they like to, you know, come through with that flank. And Hookars felt like they had to push out, they had to check mid, trying to see if anyone was there. And once they saw that no one was there, they went back to the A side. The clock is ticking. They have to get the plant down, and just not enough caution being taken with clearing those corners, and they lose the round.
Well, talk of caution, Mask is going to have to exercise a little bit because they're about to run into Brody if they try and move through. Satchel actually going to be coming through. Reveals the position but allows you to get the res online. The last of the ults now picked up, and if you try and push this Sage, it is pure bait. You are going to be walking into the op shot, and if you don't use that lid to come through, you are pretty much signing your death warrant. As Hookars have managed to find a pick, the A side a little bit less clear, but they still want to move towards the B. Op shot comes through, actually misses, forces the dash to come out from the Jet, but Hookars still aren't able to push in. So the operator is going to be able to move safely away. So it is going to be a push onto this A site. They've heard the op shot. They know where it's playing. You can actually even see Masked is waiting to make sure that Brody doesn't move through Garage and try and catch the team in the back, as Akimbo, without this information, without anything like a Cypher or a Killjoy or even a Sky, is forced to wait in this lurk position to see if TENSTAR wants to try and grab mid control.
Yeah, David is gonna be put down, but the res is gonna come through right away. Derma gets one, gonna have to back off a little bit as the Lear blocks completely his line of sight. Hunter's Empress has been popped, and so is Hunter's Fury. 14 seconds on the clock, and the plant has been stopped by Doma. Polvi with that operator picking up a Kimber. Although Doma has been put down, 6 seconds on the clock, they have to plant it. The plant is gonna come through. It's now looking like a 2v3 from the side of Hookars, and they have to make it work. They still have 3 players alive. The resurrection from Brody is still online, and he is completely wrapped around them. Doesn't look like anyone is currently looking at flank. Polvi taking out Mask, making this a 1v3. It's just that much more difficult for Mishu, and he doesn't connect the shot. Brody take him out of the Fuse. Once again coming through from TENSTAR. They have secured this round. They played it so patiently. They really waited for Hookars to get onto a specific site. They held onto the Hunter's Fury, delayed that plant, and they just made it their own round.
Yeah, and because the Hunter's Fury delayed the plan, Hookars weren't able to get themselves underneath the high ground to try and hide away from the op. So Polvi doesn't even actually need to swap onto a rifle to be able to use the weapon for when it does become that post-plant position. Is able to still find a lot of impact in the fight because all of Hookars are actually just pushed away from the spike, and if they want to try and contest it, they have to peek straight into the operator. As now 2 rounds behind, economy is starting to fall a little bit to the waist of Hookars. David is looking for a pick. The knives needed to connect. That kill meant so much more to Hookars if they'd been successful, but it's TENSTAR who are going to find first blood. And now Hookars are just forced to try and keep control of mid. Wait, see if TENSTAR are going to get a little bit too aggressive to try and equalize, as now they are wondering a little bit what to do. The Jet being out of the way, the knives is the threat that they were really relying on to be able to brute force their way into the operator without investing so much of its utility before they actually know where it's playing from.
They have the Viper's Pit online, which could potentially be something that Hookars is going to look to play off of. But it's just a matter of being able to get space initially, being able to get onto a site. And whereas 3 members are going for the B, there is Mishu by himself going on to A site, and he's going to get spotted out right away by Cray. And Polvi is going to see 1 member. He's going to take out Jarlo. He was ready for that. Might not have been ready for that just yet. So it's a 2v5, and this is looking difficult on the side of Hookars. They have to somehow contest the operator as the time is ticking, and they need to determine exactly what side they want to go to. The rest of TENSTAR has already rotated. They've already made their way onto the side. Snakebite is gonna force Polvi out just a little bit. And the time just keeps ticking. Although Akimbo takes out the operator, Brody and Derma are right on their tracks. Round number 7 is won by TENSTAR. And it's looking like Hukars once again is falling into that pattern of whether or not they want to be pushing onto a specific site. And once they lose one member, what should they be doing?
It felt like they were trying to fake. Like, not only were you trying to get information, because the second that you actually move towards the A site, you see that Pulvy isn't in Raptors, isn't trying to contest belt, the operator's got to be playing on the B site, which is why they were so hesitant. They knew to go for the elbow peek through Garage. They knew to try and bait the op shot out. But unfortunately, they're not able to get the punishment to Pulvy. And so Brody is actually able to get the heal onto the Jet, allowing him to go as aggressive as he was previously, as still this operator tends to remember won the round despite Pulvy going down. They've got the weapon back up. Sagewall is going to buy even more time, as Hukars now 1 minute 25 seconds has allowed Pulvy to just be able to get all the way to the back of Yellow! You peek! You don't use the smoke! You don't obscure the site! Not even a toxic screen going to be coming through, and Pulvy is able to easily connect the shot to the Sage's head. As we are seeing Hukars able to make momentum. 2 picks gone their way. Lish shot through. Doma forced to pull back. No Hunter's Fury going to be in the hands of the Sova to denying this plank coming through. But the Sagewall has already been invested from Hukars, remember. Yellow is actually even out of the fight. So it's going to be really hard to actually safely be able to get the plant down, as it seems like XMS is just looking for this toxic screen. Wants to go for the hero play. Finds one. Looking for that second. David out of the way. You've got Tour de Force if you really want to use it. Just inching their way through, but Hukars stalwart have set up this crossfire. The second that you peek, the second that the sign queue comes through, 3 players are just going to jump out straight for your blood. XMS isn't even able to try and use the sign queue to pull them out of position, knows that that's just going to be signing the death warrant, has to try and find a pick before the sign queue can come through, and isn't able to win the duel this time.
Hukars brute forcing that operator. They lose the first member as Jarlo has been put down, but they're still comfortable and confident enough to push that operator. Once they get Pulvy out of the picture, once that operator has been put down, it became just that much more easier for Hukars to get onto that site. Pulvy has just been doing so much damage with the operator, and taking him out was crucial for Hukars to be able to get the round in. They had invested the barrier orb earlier on, so they weren't able to completely get the secure plans, but XMS were so far on the other side of the map, it didn't truly matter. Hunter's Fury is going to be popped, not going to get any tags through, but neither are they going to be able to get any information. The Viper's util making it so much more difficult to rush onto site. Gonna spot out one member, and TENSTAR knows that Hukars love to just clump together onto one site, and Pulvy Brody have already just pushed out so far onto B side. They're looking to wrap around, but David seems to be ready with the operator, is able to ping them. He's gonna see one player take him out. Brody is gonna come through with a double peek. Mass is gonna be put down, and I don't think this is something that Hukars expected, as they only had David looking at B side, looking at that wraparound. I don't think they expected a double peek. It did work out in favor of, I would say, Hukars, but the trade came through right away. The operator is still in the hands of Hukars. They can still play off of that. XMS also pushing out aggressively, looking towards gaining control of Kitchen, but Akimbo has already worked his way forward. Not aware. Akimbo doesn't actually XMS doesn't check. Akimbo doesn't get spotted out, so they're gonna have a bit more time going on to B. They're gonna be pushing through B main, but also Kitchen at the same time. Will be able to spot out Birdie. Gets tagged by the operator. It's only 12 seconds on the clock, and it's now or never from the side of Hukars. Brody gets one. Jarlo with the trade. Spike is not gonna be down. It's gonna come down now. XMS top popping. Tour de Force gets one, gets another. Mishu's the last one. Ref picked up the operator. Uldur takes out XMS. He's now in a 1v2. The plant is down, and all he has to do is play time. Time is his best friend. He gets one. Not enough, as Cray takes him right out, and this is another win on the board for TENSTAR.
Oh, again, you sort of see the problem that Hukars falls into, right? 12 seconds on the clock. You don't really get a time to set up the utility. You have to put the spike onto the ground as quickly as possible. You're not able to clear the site, so Brody is able to find one behind Yellow, and yes, Mishu's able to get one, but not find the second. And that could have been really dicey for TENSTAR, because there's a reason that Pulvy went so aggressive. they had the reds there. They really wanted to see it. In fact, you can actually even see Brody start to go into the animation for it. The Sage Wall had been invested to try and get Polvi back into the fight, but the wall breaks before the rest can come through, and Brody is actually keeping a hold of the ultimate, knows that if Polvi was res back, the wall not being there to stop the bullets would have meant that he'd just be back again in that respawn a little bit sooner, as Hukar's now on to Kiko once more. It's going to be a rifle in the hand of Mast, who does have the Empress. If you start to find the momentum, the Reyna is absolutely the one you want to have with the firepower to be able to pop the ultimate, get in close, use the dismiss. The second that you find a kill, to get in a little bit closer to Devour coming through so that you can get the heal. As Hukar's once again watching that flank, making sure that it's safe, as this time Polvi not going to go as aggressive as we've seen, just waiting to see whether or not Hukar's are going to try and push, potentially punish a player moving through. As it looks like they do want to go just group up once more, try and brute force this operator away. One person takes the hit, and the rest try and chase the operator away, but Polvi has already hightailed it. Because this time they're expecting to just be lapped upon by a full team already all the way towards the back of that B side. Resurrection even going to now be coming through from Brody, as all of Hukar's have moved away. Can't try and punish, can't even drop the lay to try and stop Polvi from being able to pick up Mask. No more rifle in your hand, no more Empress, no wall to even get a safe plant for going through. Hukar's plan is rapidly falling into disarray.
Initial plan of just running onto the A site, being stopped right in their tracks. XMS picking up a 2K, finishing off the round 7-3 so far in this half, and it's looking a bit difficult for Hukar's. They had the plan of going onto the A site. I liked the caution that they had when rotating towards B. They throw out the lair in mid, but even though Polvi was completely blind, he still got the pick off on Mishu, and having that Sova still alive, being able to throw out the recon dart, being able to collect information for the team, maybe even spot out the opera on the back of site would have been so good for the side of Hukar's. Just very unlucky that it was Mishu that took the hit, and he was the one that been put down, preventing Hukar's from gathering that information onto that B side. They only knew a couple of players went to A, and this is something we've seen time and time again so far from Hukar's, just playing that clock. It's just going down, and then you're forced into a very awkward position. Although Mass has been put down, Resurrection is going to come right through. Doma does pick up David on the way, and XMS pushed up very aggressively. It looks like TENSTAR continuously wants to punish Hukar's for their undecisiveness in terms of not wanting to go for one specific site. Going onto that A site, they want to try and call that fake, and every single time they do, one player from TENSTAR pushes up aggressively, and it works out in their favor as XMS puts down another player from Hukar's.
Yeah, XMS, it seems like, just hides a little bit, ducks behind the barrel, is then able to get to the rendezvous towards the back of the site, just pops that, parkour, gets the spike plant, and denies it entirely. And that's buying so much time off of the clock for Hukar's. Recon Bolt has now been destroyed, Mishu not going to be able to get a lot of information, as TENSTAR's full force has now been able to group around. Spike's still not gone down, by the way. That Sage Wall is going to be shattering any second now. The Kimbo does have it, but you can see the fact that that Viper's toxic screen is already planted on the A site makes it so much harder for them to safely get this plant from going through, because there's nothing to obscure the angle or the verticality, as TENSTAR can just wait and punish you the second that it goes through. Polvi's actually still holding onto the operator, so if you try and peek through yellow, there's nothing in his way. And that is going to be a very fast and clean defuse coming out from TENSTAR. As Hukar's punched, it feels like they don't know as well where TENSTAR are actually going to be setting up their pieces, right? So often we've seen Polvi just holding down the B site with the operator, waiting for them to walk in, but this time they actually mix things up. XMS goes onto the B side, Polvi holds the A, and the fact that Hukar's have to try and look for that belt control, don't know where the operator is playing, really burns their clock once more.
Yeah, time and time again, we've seen it from the side of Hukar's. Their clock is ticking, but also a couple of lineups that were coming through from TENSTAR made it just impossible for Hukar's to get that plan down.
Oh, Jimmy.
Sure, you had the barrier orb.
Look at this, the double up! I love the play. Whether you run into on A, whether you run into it on B, you're gonna be walking into an up. And Hukar's, if you're not expecting it, you hear one op shot. You think, okay, rotate. It's on the A side, it can't possibly be on the B. But I do love that they're just committing to this. They're trying to get on top of Polvi and actually get him out of the way with the numbers once more. As he does have the knives, and he just manages to find a Kimbo in a split second. Drops the Cloudburst, and then he's gone.
And away he goes. Barrier up also making it so difficult for them to push through. Polby with the operator. He gets one on Empress is popped, but it doesn't matter. Brody finds him right away. Jarlo with the 2K on that Spectre does manage to get a couple of players. Misha with the Guardian making it work. Another player has been put down, and as Jarlo is going to be wrapping around, he finds Doma, but XMS on the back with a headhunter. A couple of shots are missing. That's a spike in XMS's hands, and Mishu, incredibly low on HP, gets taken out by the operator. A clutch coming through from TENSTAR, and that barrier orb did more harm than good.
And this is why they felt like they could go for the double up play. Sideswap has come through. Money not going to be brought through. Hookahs to stop TENSTAR from hitting double digits, to stop themselves from being able to set themselves up for a tasty attacking side and fast attacking side. They do need to pick up pistols. And I worry that they're going to get into that mentality of we need to go fast, we need to find aggression. It worked for Polvy, it worked for XMS. We've got the Reyna, we've got the Jet. That's a lot in the ways of setting us up to go for that very early aggressive peak, that playstyle. And TENSTAR can really bait them into this. Look at this. They're nowhere near the A site. They're waiting to see whether or not Hookahs are going to challenge them on B. And the second that you actually try and shoot, the slow actually going to be coming through nicely. Does actually buy Yalo a little bit of time to set this wall into play. Lets you still have a peek and gash, but you go so aggressively forward. You do fall into that mentality that there's going to be an entire team. You have to go for a pick. You have to buy time for the rest of your players to be able to rotate if it is a fake. And Hookahs now are going to be Sage behind, numbers behind, the one thing that was delaying TENSTAR from moving forward, removed from the fight.
On a slow orb, although it bought a little bit of time, and so did the barrier orb. The really aggressive play from Jarlo, don't think he expected more than one player peeking through, but they did. They're now gonna have the Sage barrier orb from themselves, and it's gonna give them a nice, safe plant as Akimbo inches his way forward, and he does manage to pick up Brody. Classic coming in handy, and now it's a matter of whether they can extend this lead further. It's equal for both teams. Both Sages have been down. Numbers are equal as well. Kimbo is gonna get spotted out. And Polvy, with that headshot, take him out as well. Masked Cray takes out Misha. David with the 2K and XMS making it work as well. That headhunter has just been so good, and XMS has really been able to make that chamber util work in his favor. The sheriff in hand. David takes out Cray, but the time is ticking and he has to get that diffuser. He's not looking to fake it. Doma is gonna get him off of that spike, and although he gets the pick off, it doesn't matter as he doesn't seem to have enough time. And the detonation is gonna come through, and TENSTAR is gonna be winning that pistol round.
Yeah, Doma just needs to buy seconds, literal seconds, that your attention is pulled away, and it's the catch-22. If you don't try and stick the defuse, the spike detonates. If you shoot this over,
yeah,
the spike detonates. If you don't shoot this over shoots you. Like, it's caught between a rock and a hard place, and unfortunately for David, there's just no way that you're going to be able to walk out of that one with a round in the hat for Hookahs.
Yeah, TENSTAR in double digits now.
This is really precarious. XMS is actually forced onto the Marshal, Hookahs. They've got armor. They've had to buy armor. They know that XMS or even Polvy is going to be coming in with that one, but Mast and Yalo are both down. TENSTAR getting super aggressive. As Hookahs trying to just move their forces towards the B. A entirely barren right now. No one having any control over Kitchen. As if you actually look, David was so aggressively forward, was trying to find a pick in mid, that you've suddenly lost that space, and an intruder has popped up and actually walked past your spawn.
It's the duality of playing aggressive. It's either gonna work out and you're gonna be able to get a pick, or something like this happens and Cray just takes absolute control of mid, of Kitchen. He's gonna put a couple of members down, and then Flawless is gonna be coming through for a TENSTAR 11-3. It's looking really, really dicey for Hookahs, and I think this is something as well that we mentioned last week, last Thursday specifically for Hookahs, where every single time that they were losing a round, or it looked like they were going to be losing a round, it was mainly specifically due to the lack of mid control. We saw it on Ascent. They never had anyone looking at that mid, and even if they did, it wasn't enough resources that were being invested to hold off a flank, to hold off a rotation, and that's something that was really abused from the side of Kova. They really made sure that it worked for them, and it looks like it's a similar pattern that Hukars is falling in right now. It's sure, you want to push out mid because you want to get that early information. You aren't on the better buying round, but if it's not timed perfectly against a player like Cray, who's so good at playing those lurking games, it's just gonna blow up in your face.
Well, TENSTAR able to get onto this B side relatively cleanly. Hukars actually pulling so far back. They are just playing for that retake. Allowing TENSTAR in, making sure that they don't get too aggressive, that they don't lose a member a little bit too early on, and the second that they're on the site, that's when you start moving forward. Remember, they're the ones with rifles. They are the ones who are the favorite in terms of the firepower, but David not able to find that backstab was expected. XMS still running the Marshal, is going to be able to shoot Yarlo, and then ever so calmly, suavely just uses that rendezvous, and they didn't actually get the spike down. They've seen all of the players on the side of Hukars on the B side, and now it is a mad dash so that they can hit the A side before Hukars are able to have the high ground. They will both arrive at the same time, and that allows Masked to be able to just stop the plant from going through, drop onto that low ground, is able to get both the Vapor and the Jet, and now XMS, who was looking for that look position, was not going to be able to find any impact. The team already dead. And Hukars, because they were able to rotate the second that they saw the spike leaving the B side, that they didn't have to worry about mid control, that TENSTAR had dash with the time that they had to get onto the side as quickly as possible. They're not able to punish the fact that Hukars have to rotate too.
Yeah, the no-scope coming through from XMS, that was absolutely beautiful. They open up the round with 2 really clean picks from TENSTAR, but as they are able to get those rounds, so David was already taken on the board. He was the one that was coming through with that flank. And they assumed, I would assume that TENSTAR is like, okay, you know what, guys? There's already one player that pushed us out aggressively and tried to get us in the back. And ooh, David with the knives, making it work this time around. And TENSTAR said, you know what, guys? I think A side might be clear here. Let's just rotate. But as you said it yourself, Hukars read it perfectly. They were able to get to the side at the same time. Look, Jarlo and David are getting a couple of picks. Spike is still down, and Polvi is still left all by himself. And I know we expected Hukars to win last round as well because of the gold advantage that they have, but look at how they've played this round. It looks like from the last 2 rounds, they just have so much more confidence in terms of decision making on the fly, rather than waiting, oh, you know, the spike has gone, maybe we should wait a couple of seconds before we go to the next round, oh, maybe we should wait onto this A side. It doesn't seem like there's too many people hitting it. And then David with those initial picks opening it up is just really working in their favor.
I love the gumption from Yarlo. Takes a fight 1 versus 2 and is able to take both of them down. Like, TENSTAR had waited. They had 2 of their players still sticking around attackers spawn to see whether or not Hukars would try and move through that mid control. The Sage finding those 2 does mean that TENSTAR are a little bit short-handed towards that side, as they are just waiting right now on the eco. Polvi on the Marshal, no operator this time around, is about to get a lot of information if they can find those angles, but those 2 toxic screens are making it so hard for either of these teams to get any information, especially with Hukars just pulling so far back once more. This is where they found a lot of value, making sure to cut that contact so that even when the drone comes through, even when the toxic screen is down, it's really hard for TENSTAR to actually get a significantly good read on where Hukars are playing. They've got 2 members still in mid. They don't know whether someone's pushing aggressively from tube. They don't know how many players are actually on this B site, how much utility they want to invest to actually get onto that ground. And that hesitation, this is what cost Hukars when they were attacking. Certainly TENSTAR, 44 seconds left on the clock. They have to make a decision. They have to start inching their way forward.
They're gonna be trying to do just that, and the snake bite is gonna drop below their feet. XMS and Jarlo on the trade coming through to get 1 apiece for both teams, equalizing the players. Spike is gonna come down. Akimbo Oh, Solo holding that B side as his life depends on it, but XMS is already inched away so fast forward. Gets Mass and David, though he does manage to put him down. Mishu making it work. They're gonna be able to get that defuse coming through, and they're slowly closing out that gap that they have with TENSTAR. And we talked about the hesitation, and we talked about whether or not a team would want to commit to a site and then last minute decide to run away. And TENSTAR, although they had their eyes on that B side, they played it so incredibly slow. It gave Cars a lot of time to reposition and to walk around. We saw it specifically. Mishu, he was playing mid, and then he was playing kitchen again, and then he was playing mid again, and just being able to rotate and cover a lot of these different angles and getting a lot of information from different parts of the map proved to be beneficial for Cars. Now, do you want to say TENSTAR was on a worse buy? Not really a round that you'd expect them to win, but it's still a good effort coming through from Cars, and the more rounds you win, specifically for this team that we talked about time and time again, they are so momentum-based. They're able to capitalize off it, and they're able to make it work for them.
Freddy's just looking for that wall bang, making sure that no one is trying to sneak a little bit of a cheeky peek from Nest. You don't want to push A-side. A-side is a death trap. You're going to get lured, you're going to get slow-orbed, and that is going to be the setup that the operator is looking for as TENSTAR do start to slowly drift. They still don't have any real idea on where Cars are positioned because, once again, Cars is being so far away, not aggressively pushing forward, not looking for those kills, not going to be running into XMS a little bit too early where the chamber can find that pick and then use the rendezvous to get out entirely unpunched. And I do love the slow playstyle coming from Cars. The slower, the longer these rounds go on, the more it benefits them. The worse a position TENSTAR finds themselves in. Toxic Screen is now going to actually go up. Cars have that inkling, it's going to be onto the B side. This is when the retake begins to come through, but you can't really contest this until all of your members from the A side have moved forward. The operator is going to have such a good angle from Snowman, but it is going to have to try and find those shots through the Viper's pit, so you're going to be waiting on Doma, or rather on Mishu with that recon bolt, give you the information necessary, finds one with the recon bolt. Probably just waiting in elbow to make sure that if you do try and contest this Viper's pit, you can get the spray with the rifle. But TENSTAR members are slowly starting to find themselves in a little bit of a disadvantage, as Cars now have to try and figure out where these attackers are playing from.
Yeah, Polvi gets that Tsuki. The time is ticking. It looks like the spike is about to detonate. Every single member has to call quits. Trey and Dharma taken out by that detonation, but the util coming through from Akimbo, it felt like it took Cars a little too long to rotate on that side. And the Owl drone is gonna come through from Mishu. He's gonna spot out Brody. David is gonna be able to play off of that, land that operating shot, take Brody out. But then we have Polvi outside of the pit that's just waiting for the members of Cars to be walking through. You have a Sova on both teams. There's the same amount of util coming through. You have both Viper pits are online. Every single member is just incredibly low. But then you have Polvi standing outside of both of these Viper pits, full HP, getting that information from Doma that there are members in, just starts spraying, and although he wasn't able to see them, this is the classic spray and pray that is coming through, and it's just working out for them. They got the picks on the members, and they were able to secure that round, and the time just kept ticking, and Cars were a little too slow.
Oh, this is nasty. You're gonna force them. Either you move up into belt where the operator is going to be waiting, or you're able to catch them unawares in the back. Spike carrier now firmly down in the ground, 6 feet under. Cars in full possession of this one. You don't need to go looking for the kills. You just need to retain spike possession. Remember, TENSTAR are sitting on match point. And so there is going to be a lot of utility, a lot of just holding your angle. Recombot going to actually pick Mask out of the way, forces the Reina to go for a little bit of a reposition. Allows TENSTAR to move further away from Garage, but the operator is not able to get zoned out so easily. Is able to find two. Spike still in the very forefront of the fight. And TENSTAR just not able to close up the distance and grab it and go. As Cars tensely, with that very early aggression, the play of being able to catch them before they can actually move up belt and contest rafters, they're able to win the round off of that move alone.
They get two nice early picks. The early aggression from Hukar so far hasn't seemed to have paid off that well. Saw it a couple of rounds from David alone, specifically on mid, trying to get early aggression, trying to get maybe a pick, maybe just a bit of info, and it didn't work. But this time around, Jalo and Mas pulling up, pushing together as a friend, as with the power of friendship. They get two of those picks, and it just really opens up the round for Hukars to push even further. And with all the members going down from TENSTAR, they had to rotate and try to get that spike, but you already have so much control over that area, you're not gonna give it up. XMS does pop the tour de force, gets the first pick on Mas, and that's Reina out of the picture. Mishra taking down Brody, so the plant has been going down. They're now gonna try and contest it, but XMS is just playing one belt, and that is such a nasty angle to be playing from with that tour de force. Already has 3, Akimbo gets 1, gets a 2k, Mishra taking out XMS as he pushes up a little bit further, and Dharma is also being put out, although he does manage to take Mishra out with the shock darts. The defuse is gonna come through safely, and Hukars is slowly but steadily closing the gap.
That's all I can say about that one. I was going to say, we've seen so many teams have such crazy eco rounds coming through, and I mean, the Chamber and the Jet, both the knives and the tour de force really do ensure that those ecos are still something that a lot of these teams do have to worry about. XMS able to find and almost win the round off of the back of that tour de force. Polvi now going for the full buy. This was the round that TENSTAR were ecoing full. Operator going to be going up against Operator. Hukar's still sitting in it. It's still got the weaponry. It's not a force coming through, which is really good because TENSTAR is still on match point. Polvi just looking for that early aggression. They've got 4 round difference. They can get aggressive. They do have the rounds to be able to look for those early picks and try and immediately stunt any of Hukars' progression. Owl Drone going to be shot through. They know exactly where Polvi is playing. They're not contesting it. They're just waiting for the operator to start to reposition, to try and move it to a space where Akimbo is going to be able to use that toxic screen to make sure that it's a little bit harder for Polvi to have the space to work with. As the 2 members from Hukars sitting on that B site, the Jet and the Reina, are giving the information to the team. They're not pushing B. We're going to try moving a little bit further aggressively forward. The toxic screen is making it a little bit harder for Hukars to work out. Remember, the Sova is not towards that B site. No recon ball going through, so you do have to just wait and see whether TENSTAR make a move from Garage. And it has allowed them to get onto the site, but they haven't used utility to try and force Akimbo out of this. Gets 1 with the spray, isn't able to find the 3rd. Spike carrier has been killed. This is the time that Hukars were waiting for to be able to get their members to reposition around this site, as poor XMS and Doma are just trying to make sure that Polvi has the space to be able to use this operator.
The clock is ticking, and we've seen this time and time again. Conscious Fury is going to come through. Mask gets 1, though the plant is going to be coming down. Another tag is going to come through as Mask gets a 2nd. Derma on a mission takes out the first member. There's 2 more left. Can he do it? He has time, but Mishur takes him right out, puts an end to the hopes and dreams, and although they are on match point, it's looking like a very difficult task from TENSTAR to close it. This was the round that they were saving for. This is the round that they had the eco for the round before. They weren't able to play off of it. Akimbo gets 2 really beautiful picks, even spots the spike because of it, gives through that information. The team is going to come through with the rotation, and Mass so far is looking really strong in terms of landing really important shots and just being the backbone, so to say, for the team. And Akimbo just being able to hold that side for that long and buy so much time for the team. Yeah, the 10-star timeout. I don't think this is something. I'm not surprised. They are 12 to. They were 12 to. I think it was 5, and Hukars have just been able to win round after round. And it's one of those teams that, as we mentioned individually, they're incredibly strong and they're really showing off their individual strengths so far. They have some of that calculated aggression coming through. We saw it with Mas Jarlo, we saw it with David as well, and Akimbo just being able to hold sites continuously, whether it's the B site, whether it's the A site, and it's making it really difficult for TENSTAR. They're like a thorn in their side, and they want to close out the game, but Hukars is like, nah, not today.
Hukars can afford the buy as well. For TENSTAR, They're wanting to win this round. They're wanting to finish things off. But unfortunately, they don't have the tour de force. They don't have the knives. All they really have to work with is the Hunter's Fury, which you want to save for when Hookahs try to go for a defuse, right? Use the Siren Q, make sure the Hunter's Fury cuts through the team, and then you can actually make sure that the clock is run down, that the spike detonates, and there's nothing that Hookahs can really do. Or you brute force it onto one of these sites. But then you need to have the weaponry to be able to actually survive when you are on that site, as it is just going to be looking for picks. Getting super aggressive, as we see so many teams do when they are on these later buys. Polvi is the only one with an SMG, XMS picking up the Frenzy. Polvi is the one that's been going the most aggressive and finding the most value with that playstyle, so it makes sense that you'd go for something that has a little bit more of an impact. Because Hookahs really don't want to lose this round. They've got the rifles, but right now they're getting overwhelmed. TENSTAR doing such a good job of being able to close up the distance with very little contact that they've been able to worm their way onto these sites. And all of the advantage that Hookah should have had with these longer lines, they've all been entirely denied. As you are able to find one, the wallbang going to pick XMS up, but that spike is still down. You have to be so very careful because Doma still has the Hunter's Fury, and if you don't manage to take the Sova out of the fray before you go for the spike to detonate, you're going to have the ultimate immediately in your face.
Polvi hiding does get spotted out and taken out by Mishu, but the time is just ticking. The shock dart making it so difficult for the defuse, and there's the Hunter's Fury that we spoke about. Doesn't get the pick, doesn't get a tag, but it does do a little bit of damage, and David is gonna have to stick it to get it to halftime. But Cray takes out David, and now it's only Mishu left, and Doma finishes him off, winning the game with a thrifty round coming through from TENSTAR.
Oh, huge. The fact that you're able to have Doma just play so far away from the fight that there is no way he's being taken out. And then you just use the Hunter's Fury. You're not able to get the tag on the players, but you are able to buy the time. And you get desperate. You have to go for the defuse. You can't afford to use the Sankey. You can't afford to go for half. You have to get the entire thing. And that's when you pop out and shoot them right in the back. There is no outplay. You do it on an eco. It's played perfectly. The fact that the timeout comes through. And this is what we talk about, right? TENSTAR, when they want to have a round that's impactful, when they want to be able to go in with confidence and aggression, we see the timeout to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that everyone knows this is the game plan. We go as quickly as possible to the A site, we hold on to as much utility as possible, we make sure that the rifles are zoned out of the fights, we take all of these angles to make sure that the rifles don't get an early pick on us. Doma plays so far away, Hunter's Fury is just there waiting in the wings that Hookahs don't have the time, and it really does feel like, unfortunately for this team, time is just an enemy that they have never been able to beat.
That is incredibly well said. That creative writing degree coming in clutch once again. And we've seen it, whether it was on attack or whether it was on defense, every single time the clock was just ticking, and Hookahs, the mentality you have to go in once you see that clock just ticking down, and also once you hear the beeps from that spike and it's going quicker and quicker, and it's something that you need to be incredibly composed and you need to stay calm and collected. But if you don't have that much of the experience, then it might not be something that you are able to do. And the last round, it was an eco round. It's a round that, being completely honest here, we didn't really expect TENSTAR to be able to pull off and to win, but they still were able to do so. MVP going to David. I think this is something that we definitely expected from him, although I want to say that Akimber, Mishu, Mast, and Jarlo, every single player did really, really well today. XMS on that chamber, like, what else can I say? That was just insane chamber gameplay coming through. So good at solo holding those sides, so good at making it incredibly difficult for Hookahs, not just to push on sides, but also to play the defense. Like, once they got that spike down and he pops out tour de force, he just gets one after the other, after the next one. And how are you going to be diffusing when there's a tour de force staring down your skull?
Yeah, TENSTAR doing a really good job as well. It's just making sure that Rafters was always something that Hookahs did have to worry about, because Spike was always in view of Belt. Yeah. And so whether it was Doma, whether it was Polvi, whether it was XMS, all three of those agents were just able to have such a stranglehold of that one angle that for Hookahs it was a case of either Akimbo is alive or Yalo is still being able to have wall, or that diffuse isn't going to be safe. And that was something that TENSTAR really did have a good grasp of. But we do have to say, huge props to Hookahs, because they were
Definitely.
so far behind. And then Sideswap came through and we saw an entirely different team. And it feels like they have a much better grasp of defense than they do of attack. And again, it really does sort of circle back to that entire idea of pacing. There was a couple of stumbles where they went a little bit too aggressive towards the beginning, and they were punished for that. But the second that they sort of started pulling back, especially the B defenses, where everyone would just sit so far away that owl drones wouldn't be able to find them, that toxic screens would go up, and you would have no clue of where they were positioned. And TENSTARs, they really struggled getting onto the B site safely, getting the spike down safely, having to invest a lot of that utility in trying to figure out where those members were playing from, and still not being able to work it out, still being punished, still seeing the spike carrier actually drop before the spike goes into the ground. You can really see why Icebox is a big comfort map for this team, and moving forward, it puts my hopes pretty high for how they're going to be able to pull Bind off, because remember, Bind is another one of their comfort maps. And I think we're actually going to see a quite long series between these two, as a lot of people expected this to be not as close as it's actually turning out to be.
Yeah, and speaking about how overpowered timeouts are in terms of getting the players back in that right mentality, we're going to have a little timeout of ourselves as we're going to be throwing it to a break, but we'll be back shortly.
Hi guys, I'm Jack Brody Emmott. I'm the in-game leader for Team TENSTAR.
My name is Niko Polvi-Polvinen. I play for TENSTAR. I am the duelist player.
Throughout the open qualifiers, I think we found it pretty easy. Our last game was a lot closer than we expected against H2O. Two very close maps. It was a very early game and I think half the team was still asleep, so hopefully we can fix that pretty easily.
Last match we played against H2O, kind of like a harder match for us. We didn't expect it to go like that close. We will be playing much more better in the group stages.
We were seeded first seed, so we're obviously favourites for the event. I think everyone in the team's feeling really confident right now. We actually get a couple of weeks of practice, which is nice, with Doma and Alex, and hopefully we can fix all the little problems for the group stage.
Feeling very confident to play in the group stages. I think most of the teams in there, we know exactly how they play, and we know everyone on the group stages. Right now, I think we have a lot of firepower in our team, especially adding Alex and Doma into our team.
I think we have the skill, just the raw aim and the raw firepower. I don't really think any other team can compete with us in that category. The team I'm looking out for is XL. I think they had a really good run in the open qualifier. They're our biggest competitor in this event.
I think that would be very nice to us, since we haven't been playing that much as a 5-man group right now.
The main goal is to get into the main event, obviously get out of the VRLs, so we're all aiming to win the event. Obviously it's a nice title to have, but we're looking to be with the big teams.
Our main goal right now is to go into the VCT promotions and win the whole thing, get into challenges too.
The VCT Promotion Tournament is what we're aiming for. We're looking to win it, and we're looking to get out of the VRLs, and yeah, looking to get into the top 10 and stay in the top 10.